Hey, friends in Facebook land and on YouTube and LinkedIn. I think we are broadcasting across several different platforms live today. I hope you are all doing well and just being well. I've really enjoyed watching all of the posts of the kids going back to school, and I can't believe that summer has semi come to an end, not completely. Thank you for all for joining us today. If you are here with me, please let me know. Put it in the chat. That way I know you're here. And as always, if you have any questions for our guest, we love this to be interactive. Please don't hesitate to put your question in the chat. As always, I am grateful for you being here with us. So I'm really excited about my guest today. I'm always excited. It's like I love my job. I get to connect with really incredible, amazing people on the daily, and so that's such a gift for me. So I'm Grace Redman, and thank you for joining us on another episode of Real Talk, where I get to have real life, raw conversations with incredible people from my circles and communities who have overcome challenges and created amazing. Today, my dynamic guest is Mahdi Azmandian. Mahdi is a computer scientist specialized in virtual reality and human computer interaction. Working as a software engineer at PlayStation, he enjoys a nice blend of serious technical design thinking and playful, wacky fun game mechanics. Beyond exploring the realm of play, he dabbles in finding joy in living a simple life and developing the life philosophies that enable it. And help me welcome Mahdi to the show today.
Hey, thanks for
Oh,
having me. Wow, it's great to
yeah.
be here.
No, I'm so grateful that you're here because you just have such an incredible energy and it's contagious. And what a great way to, start a Wednesday afternoon. So thanks for joining me.
Absolutely, it just the energy resonates with you, and I think it's great to be in your presence and have an opportunity to be here today. I'm
Oh,
excited.
thank
Thank you.
you. Thank
Yeah.
you so much. Thank you. So this is going to be fun because you're definitely fun, that's for sure. And it's there's so many, awesome things, I want to touch on with you and kind of want to you know how to have fun, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And so and your energy is lively and you're constantly, looking to like I've never seen you not smiling and
Yeah.
positive. And I know again we all go through it, but tell me a little bit about where that like how did you embrace the energy to, I know we're not positive all the time,
Yeah.
but you kind of exude that energy. So can you tell me a little bit about that? Like where does that come from?
I, if I'm very frank, I think the most credit really goes to my father because I think from a young age he was raised really religious with very religious values, and he was Muslim specifically, and is currently also. But I think there was a lot of certain somber, serious values that were instilled in him. I think that's what the path that he lived before. But eventually, he decided to move to the United States and go to and learn more about just different ways of living and different perspectives on life. And I think he got exposed to a lot of different motivational speakers, and
Mm,
through that, I think he learned a lot more about just changing your mindset and paradigm shift, if you will. And that I think led him to just see the world differently. And when he had us, like I think as his kids, it he just naturally brought us into that world. And I remember every morning when we would get a ride to school, we'd be listening to like maybe Anthony Robbins, maybe Jim Rohn, maybe Ryan Tracy, sometimes Wayne Dyer, and that's kind of what just our morning commute looked like. And even if I was a kid, just like not paying attention, and we didn't have phones back then for me to be distracted, at least like even if I was looking around, eventually I'd hear some
totally.
nuggets of information. And I think he was a morning person. And so he would just like come up with like this energy of a good morning. Are you ready to take on the day? And like, this is the day, you're ready for the day of judgment. Like he'd say weird, funny things like that. And we're like, okay, dad, whatever. And so I think having that energy and like seeing someone be full of energy in the morning, I think was a way to jumpstart the
Mm,
day and just make you think that this is how you should be. And I think we start our lives with idolizing our parents, and sooner or later we realize they're just human. But in those early years, we just think that this is how it should be, and we just really want to mimic their behavior. And I think it was something that I think I picked up naturally from my father.
Mhm. Mhm.
And as you go around life, you just realize that, well, smiling always makes things better. If not, at least if it doesn't do anything, at least it'll either make things better or not do anything at all. And you'd rather be in a situation where you have something to brighten your day and other people's also.
No, I totally agree, and I love that because you use the old timers like Tony Robbins, Jim Rohn, Wayne Dyer,
Yeah.
and I same thing. Like I in my teens started listening to all of the old timers. I started with Tony Robbins. So
Hmm.
my house was like that, where my kids were like, what are you listening to? This is stupid. And but I let it play on the TV, on the radio, wherever, or on the CDs, wherever I was. And you're right, because now I don't even have to tell my kids. Like their daily part of their daily routine is listening to Tony Robbins or Grant Cardone or any,
Yeah.
there's motivational speakers that kind of speak to them.
Hmm.
And it does. Our environment really does. We are a product of our environment. It could go both ways, right? This way or this
That's right.
way. But you're right. And not everything is unicorn and roses. But what a way, to start the day with your dad setting that tone and then you kind of emulating that.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
and something you talk about is routine, and something you're proud of, you've mentioned you're proud of, is constantly refining your routines.
That's right.
So can you speak on that? Like, what does that
Sure.
mean?
Yeah, I think the way I think about it is that as as you go about life, you realize like, hey, I prioritize this specific thing. Like when I think about my current routine, it's like, oh, I remember a long time ago learning about something called a neti pot, and
Mm,
it's like, what is this? Like, okay, cool, let me try it. Interesting. And I tried a few times, like, hey, it seems to actually like clear up my breathing, and I sometimes have like breathing problems. So I realized like, hey, if I do this, this will be actually good to have in my routine. And so um, it's I think if you wake up every morning and try to review like, okay, what are all the things that I think about? Like, well, definitely want to brush my, you check like, I guess I want to brush my teeth. I guess I also like want to do this. There's so much effort that goes into like the decision making every morning. You're like, oh, I have to do this, and that. And it's like, if you want to come up with that list every single morning, so much of your cognitive energy, if you will, really gets spent.
mm,
And there's so much overhead that gets added if you want to constantly keep track of all these different things. And I think with experimentation, I think I found that like, all right, if you just have certain like lists of routines that you do, and if you've, I think the book of, I think there's a book called The Power of Habit. I'm trying to remember what it
Oh
was called, but I
yes,
think,
I've listened to a little bit of it, but I forgot
yeah,
the name of the gentleman. I love that. I loved what I listened
that's
to.
right. And I think that mindset of just creating these habits has been really helpful. And there's a lot of techniques for how to create and ingrain these habits in you. But I think just doing that makes me now not worry about all these different things. Because
Mhm.
sometimes I feel like I have these like personal goals I want to reach. And I have to like think like, oh gosh, did I work on that today? And I have to go reflect on like, man, am I making progress on that? Oh, I forgot to do this.
Mm,
But when you have all these routines set up and all these, you make sure you're making minimal progress every day towards those things you think about, you can just you're just on this journey, and you just take steps forward, and the results will come. You don't
mm,
have to always worry about, gosh, am I doing that thing? Will I ever like make progress on that front? So I
mm,
think the way I go about my life is I think to myself, hey, here's the thing that I think about. Here's the thing that I care about. Now, what, like, let's say people think about like fitness or exercise, right? And a lot of people might say, you know what, tomorrow I'm going to start going for like a 20-minute run. I'm going to do this, do this, do that, do that. I think for me, I started with like thinking, if I want to make something part of my habits and life, it has to be extremely easy. You know
yeah.
what I mean? Like, so I really remember starting off when I was, I think, like maybe 13, 14, I don't know when it was, but I said, hey, I want to start running.
Mm,
And I remember starting with 1 minute. And then
that's
it
it.
turned, yeah, then it turned into like a 4-minute routine, right? And just very, very slowly, when I really felt like this is effortless to me, I started ramping it up. And it
Mhm,
takes time to do that. But I think the key to making a habit really work and stick for it to be pretty much effortless. And effortless when you haven't really trained that muscle of whatever this new thing is that you want to incorporate in your life, it has to be very, very minimal. It has to be very, very small. That's
yeah.
like, oh yeah, I can do that. That's easy. Then over time, slowly you can build it more and more. But anytime someone wants to propose something, a big change I want to make in life, I'm like, no, 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 it has to be effortless because
I
I know. Mhm.
no, I agree.
Yeah, because white knuckling and trying to use your willpower every day just is not sustainable.
You're right. It's not sustainable. And I love what you mentioned, little little steps every day, because I believe in that book he talks about it just takes 1%,
Yeah.
1% each step, because then you'll have the compound effect. Because you're
Mhm.
right, like if I'm gonna, if you've never ran, and then you're gonna say I'm gonna go run half an hour, forget it, it's not going to work. But I
Yeah.
love how you said, even if you start with a minute and then it becomes effortless, like brushing your teeth, every you don't even think about it, it's a
Right.
habit. So what I hear you saying is start very small, and creating new habits, and starting small and taking the time, those habits will just become part of the routine. You don't even think about it. Is that what you mean by having it be effortless?
Yeah. I mean, I think when you want to alter your routine slowly, I think those alterations have to be very minimal and easy to execute.
Hmm.
I think that's what it is. Like just yeah, and I think ultimately you end eventually over time, if you slowly incorporate these things, you realize you are hitting all these many multitude of goals that you're interested in,
Hmm.
slowly making progress on them, and really not needing to think about them every day anymore. You know?
I love that. And that's what the journey is about. It's the compound effect. It's those little small decisions that we make every day.
Hmm.
And of course we're going to fall off, but it doesn't just come, when you see people that are successful, their success did not come overnight. I mean, it
Absolutely.
was a, accumulation of small decisions, probably over, many days, years, weeks, decades.
Absolutely. I personally remember sometimes doing these things where I'd have like a little flashcard or some card, little sign that just one single sign, not like several signs. Because if you have many signs, they just get lost. But from
Overwhelming.
time to time, I'd put one little sign up on my desk that has something on it. And a lot of times it was something along the lines of like, trust the system. You know what I mean? Have faith in like, hey, if I do these things, it's going to happen.
Yes.
And it takes away the fear and anxiety of like, hey, am I making progress on these things?
Hmm.
Yeah, there's something comforting about that.
Well, you just touched on, a point, trust. Trust the system, whatever that system may be. Is it the universe? Is it um, God, source, higher power, whatever you want to call it? Trust the system, because you and I both know when we trust something, okay, I'll use the word, something magical does happen.
Hmm.
And we just we let things be, and then everything starts to fall into place, and we have to take action.
Absolutely. Hmm.
What are some of your routines that you've implemented that now are just like effortless?
I think like right now, this is a kind of a tangent, but when shelter in place and all that happened and we started working from home, I just realized that I I think maybe because I was used to getting so much stimulation and endorphins and all these good
Mhm.
feelings from interacting with people and seeing people in the morning and walking on campus, I realized that I'm missing those good feelings. And I just the only thing I can think of, and I mean I guess I spoke to therapists and then I really looked around to see what I can do. But eventually I found that frankly just working out a lot is what makes me feel good. I mean meditation and that kind of journaling and things like that are also very helpful for me. But I find that just getting almost like jacked on drugs, if you will, the drug of post
Endorphin.
workout absolutely is what feels great for me. And right now, like just this morning, for instance, I did 1 hour of exercise, being on an exercise bike. I ran for 3 miles,
Mm.
and I did some core workout, and then I came to work. And that sounds elaborate. And my boss is like, "This is not sustainable. This is not good for you." But I've slowly incorporate these. Right, like it was a half-hour bike only every morning at first, and then I've ramped it up from there. And I
Mhm.
think part of the key point I think here that has made this routine, for instance, work for me is that going back to the point about making sure it's effortless, or in my case, I wanted to make sure this activity was fun. So maybe like 2, 3 years ago, I found this life hack, if you will, that works for me. Being a video game fan and working at PlayStation also, I wanted to incorporate video games in my routine, but I felt guilty a lot of times, like this is not time maybe well spent. And I found this trick that I can hop on the exercise bike and play video games at the same time.
I love it.
And it's really funny because people used to like, I know people who like either listen to music and I'm like, God, music after a while it gets exhausting. And then I sometimes would watch TV and I'm like, put like a tablet on in front of my exercise bike and watch that. But sometimes like the show had to be really, really engaging, or just eventually I have to get bored and of cycling. But when I play video games, especially really, really engaging ones, I just find it like, it just my mind is completely just off the exercise bike, and it's just like ingrained. This like, I mean, it's just happening in the background. I'm not even paying attention to it. So every morning when I wake up, like a lot of people are like, oh gosh, do I go to the gym? It's like, for me, it's like I wake up, I'm like, I want to play video games right now. Yes.
That's an amazing life hack. That's an amazing life hack. I love that. Well, that's how, you stay on the bike for an hour, because you're doing something else that engages you. And, again, he talks about habit stacking. So right there, you're habit stacking. You're enjoying your habit of playing video games, and you're getting on the bike.
Yeah.
So that's a great life hack. I love that.
Yeah. And frankly, by the time like I'm done with that first workout, I feel really ready for a run. Because personally, I mean, it depends on different people's biology, but I sometimes have a hard time just like rolling out of bed and going for a run. My body's not ready for it. But when I break a sweat with the exercise bike, then I'm ready for running afterwards. And that's
no, really I totally get it. I mean, I'm a big exerciser. I exercise every morning. I mean, that's how, after my morning meditation, that's how I start my day. And same like you, the endorphins. Yeah. And that's why I exercise, is for the endorphins, because I really, like you, I mean, I exercised before the pandemic, but I really need to be connected and feel that connection. And that was, again, during the pandemic, I exercised a lot more because I needed that.
Yeah.
I need that connection constantly. Now, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but, I could have a worse addiction, than wanting to connect with people.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's fascinating how I've read some audiobooks or listened to some audiobooks about addiction, and it's really fascinating how we have certain addictions. I think, to me, if they're sustainable and your body is not adapting to them, if you're not harming yourself, in the case of at least working out or like having these meditation routines, I think it's healthy. I think it's part of our life. And it's fascinating that I've heard about this concept of stress and rest. So I read this book called, I think it was called Peak Performance or Peak Performers. And it talks about this concept of how a lot of athletes, what they really, really prioritize, you would think it's like, oh, maybe they have to work out extremely or work out every day and blah, blah, blah. But one really important goal for them is to make sure they get enough rest, and that's kind of a really key important factor in making sure that we fully recover from our work that we're doing, so we can attack it again the next day. Absolutely. And I think especially when people are working from home, they're like, there's no boundary of when we begin and end our work. So you're constantly kind of working, and you're constantly kind of getting tired, and you're not fully recovering and resting. And I think our culture doesn't really prioritize boasting about how much sleep we got or how much rest we got, Yeah. And we talk about work hard, play hard. And I honestly think about like the athlete's perspective is like work hard and rest hard,
You hit a huge point, and something that I've talked about so many times, because I fell into that trap of, wearing the badge of honor for working so hard and never resting. And, I paid the price for that. And you're right. It's when we rest, we can do more. We can be more productive. We have more to give, but our society does not, does not honor that. It's about 10x and go, Absolutely. Go. And whoever comes in the earliest and stays the latest. And that is self-sabotage across the board. Absolutely. Now, are there times where we have to hustle and take action? Right. Yes.
Yeah.
But it's not sustainable on just a consistent, constant basis like we were taught to do.
And it's really wild to me that this concept kind of links to this other idea that I've been learning about, which is, so this issue that we have with like tying back to the addiction that I was telling you about. So when it comes to eating and our body, I think getting back to the same idea of you stress and then rest. So a lot of dietitians and a lot of experts in our health and nutrition have been realizing that it's actually kind of important for us to have these cycles of fasting and feasting. And it's a similar idea of like, you really, really have a good meal, and then you let your body rest and you don't eat for a while. And instead of constantly snacking and worrying about, oh, your metabolism might drop and all that kind of concern, it's actually think the book that I've been recently just read, it was called The Obesity Code. I think that was kind of hitting on these points specifically. But I think what happens with specifically with our body is that there's this concern about our insulin sensitivity. It's so insulin gets produced when you have sugar and carbohydrates and all that. And what happens over time is that if you keep exposing yourself constantly to insulin, your body adapts and becomes insulin not very like you become desensitized to insulin. And essentially, what happens is that you need more and more sugar and more kind of to keep yourself going. And so that's kind of what the addiction of food comes from, where you don't give it time to rest and your insulin to go back to normal and your sensitivity kind of to reset, right? When you're constantly exposing your body to sugars and all that and food, you're constantly keeping it at a high elevated state. And that's where the addiction forms. Mm-hmm. If you have these cycles of resting, then your body will down regulate and work itself out. And I think that's the same thing. Mm-hmm.
I love that because I've heard about that. And it's true. I felt it in my own body when, I could tell when I eat sugar or carbs, I find myself, hungry again. And it's a cycle. That's what sugar does.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then, they talk about the fasting and I agree with you. I think it's good to allow, our body, just, our digestive system time to rest and reset as well, because our body's working to process all that sugar and carbohydrates.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So it's, not that it's in a fight or flight response, but it's constantly going. So it doesn't give the parasympathetic, part of the nervous system to kick in.
Absolutely. And one other way that I think about this whole concept again, like the stress and rest, is that I feel like when you fully stress or fully eat or fully whatever, it's kind of like these cycles of being fully immersed in the task at hand. It's being really present. If it's eating food, you're really having a good meal and enjoying it. And if it's working, you're really enjoying your work and fully being engaged with it and having a great time. And then you're completely disengaged or in a sense, completely focused on resting, completely focused on being like relaxed. And I think that's really, it works perfectly with the idea of being fully present. If you're going to do something, do it fully. Don't half-ass things. That's kind of how I think about it.
Which brings me to, you definitely have been exploring these self-help concepts for such a long time. And you just hit on one of the points, and correct me, if I'm wrong. I think one of the points of self-help is presence, being in the now. And that's so difficult because we were never taught to be present or in the now. It's like we're constantly worrying about the future, ruminating on the past. We're never taught to be, okay, enjoy where you are right now.
Absolutely.
So how do you help yourself stay present when our mind is naturally monkey mind?
I think when we have way too many things that we care about and prioritize in our life, then it's hard to carve out time to focus on one thing. And I think getting back to the idea of like what I was saying, like when you mentioned I care about the simple life, I think it's like that a little bit, because we really don't have enough energy and time and bandwidth to care about so many things in our lives. And I think early on at some point, I remember like after college where you're told like, hey, anything is an option. Any career is a possibility. Like there's limitless possibilities. It's great to start with that and explore. Exploration is great to know what you're interested in. But at some point in my life, I realized like, hey, I know I have an interest in music, but I really won't have time to also be a musician on the side in addition to what I'm doing. And I think having the courage to say, I don't have, in this lifetime, I won't be able to attend to this. And that's okay.
That's okay.
Allowing that to be like, hey, you and I both have experience going to dance classes together, right? And I think I've accepted that like dancing for me will be a fun side workout routine that I do. It's not going to be my career. I'm not going to be a professional dancer, and that's okay. I think allowing yourself to, again, simplify your life or have less things that you're juggling at the same time lets you then carve out dedicated time to work on that one thing and then really be present with that, and then abandon that and then work on the next thing and fully be present with that.
Yes, that was beautiful. And it's simplifying, which brings me to something I didn't know that you're a minimalist.
Yeah.
And so practical minimalist. So can you tell us what that means?
So practical minimalist, I think, I'm not sure if that's a technical term. I haven't looked it up, but my understanding of practical minimalism is that I think people, when they hear about minimalism, they imagine these Instagram photos that are just like someone with their background is so clean and pristine. There's like nothing there, and like it's just
Right.
one little coffee. And I think to myself that this is person, if they cook in that kitchen, like you see, like there must be stuff around. Like someone who uses their kitchen can't have everything put back up and clean and perfect and tidy all the time. I
Right.
imagine if
Right.
you're cooking, there's some things out, there's something available, and like that's just. But for the most part, there's not a lot of clutter, or it's like, or there's, you can navigate things very easily. I think that's my, at least that's my impression of what minimalism looks like, because I live in a small 350 square feet apartment, a studio apartment, very small, but I have a lot of, in a way, I have a lot of things. Like when you walk around, there's very little clutter. Like you can easily navigate. It always looks good. If a guest just shows up out of nowhere, my place normally is like looking very, very presentable. But I do happen to have a lot of things that I care about, and it's not that I like you'll see like, oh yeah, I might have like a coasters around. I might have like an exercise bike in the corner. I might have equipment. I might have like a massager, whatever. These things are all around. There's like candles. These are things that I have, but they're all accessible. They're not in the way. You know what I mean? It's the things that I care about are still available to me.
Mm-hmm.
I've allowed myself some things that I care about, and those are going to be in my space. But I think that's kind of the practical minimalism that I'm talking about, where you're not just trying to have this facade of like a space with nothing in it, because that's not usable. You can't, and every single time you want to do something, it's going to be so much overhead because you have to find it, grab it, set it up, whatever. And that's not practical. That's not realistic.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the minimalism part, and I'm not sure if I even really was using that term when I was younger, but I think this idea of just being a bit more mindful of the things you have, I think was what I started thinking about. At a younger age, I remember my mother would have so many different things around the house. And also specifically, I remember the first pet peeve that I had was like, our fridge was packed. There's so much stuff in it. I'm like, I don't know what's where. And like, there's these things that would get tucked in the corner behind the fridge that were just living for themselves for days.
That's a Middle Eastern refrigerator. We have this, and the refrigerator in the garage, and the freezer in the garage.
Oh, absolutely. My grandmother had like 2 freezers in the back and all that. Yeah, yes, that's definitely the life that they have. And I thought to myself, like, this is not good. And like the first thing that would break my heart was like when she would buy a bunch of fruits and they would start rotting and going bad. And then they just leak juices and you have to bring them all out and clean. And I thought to myself, this is not healthy. This is not good. And I would ask her and implore her, Mom, please stop buying all these things, or like wait till it's over, wait till we're done with this thing. And I would even say like, let us miss not having like lemons or oranges, to think, oh, remember how we had oranges in the fridge? That was nice. Let's crave it and miss it and go back to it again. So you're like, hey, I'm craving for oranges. I'm going to go reach out and go out of my way and pick them up next time. But she always kept everything stocked all the time. And I sometimes would try to like get rid of it or like clean it up or something. And she was like, Maddie, when you get your own place, you're going to be in charge of your fridge then. As long as you're in my house, it's off limits. I do things my way. I'm like, whoa, okay, fine. So sure enough, I was like, I just can't wait to have my own place. And when I had my own place, the fridge was all, like, I tell people that I can honestly recite what's in my fridge, like top to bottom at every point in time. And I would hate to have some jar, something in the corner that just expires without me finding out about it. That breaks my heart.
I hear you. That's my fridge.
Yeah.
Now you're inspiring me to, minimize in that way. But you're right. Like we're used to having so much of everything, and it does like so much does go to waste. And then just it's like we live in this society, like we're blessed, like we have so much.
Yeah.
But where can we start to minimize that and just be more practical and more mindful?
Yeah, I mean, I think it works again nicely with this notion of mindfulness and having intention with what you're doing. So like, hey, I want to make this dish, so I'm going to set that intention, go get those things, buy it, bring in my fridge and make that dish, right? It's not just buying a bunch of stuff to have it in the fridge in case one day I might need them.
I agree. I'm working on that, Mahdi. I'm working I really am.
Yeah.
I'm really working on it because now that my kids are older, they like to go out and eat. And then here I am, like the old school, like I'm always having these, and unfortunately, sometimes it goes to waste. So you really kind of making me think like it is time to make those changes.
Yeah.
Um, it's too much.
Hmm.
Too much.
Yeah. I think if you run a kitchen, you know what I mean? If you if you're running a restaurant, I understand you want to have all these reserves and always be ready and
Right.
there's
But
plans.
we're not running restaurants.
Yeah, exactly.
Not at home, at least.
That's right.
Um, so what I heard you say, just the minimalism is just, it doesn't we don't have to have a lot of things. Have what you want
Hmm.
and just be mindful and intentional with the other thing because we're such a consumer society.
Yes, that's right.
Another thing we are about our society is like, we're there's like a status quo.
Hmm.
These are the things you have to do to be successful.
Yeah.
And if you deviate from these things, you're not going to be successful, which I find that's really it hinders us as a society because there's so many different ways to
Hmm.
be successful, and I don't like putting these thoughts into especially the younger generation's ears. There's different ways to be successful.
Hmm.
I know that as a young child you definitely stepped out of the status quo, so can you tell us a little bit about that story?
Absolutely. I think the first thing that really helped me, frankly, was that I was born in the US, and when I was 9, we moved to Iran. And I think the first kind of shock to my system was that, hey, people are living their lives very differently here compared to how people lived in the US. And I thought, well, okay, so there seems to be more than one way of living life. It's like whatever they were doing, people were living in the US, and I thought whatever they were doing was working for them. And then in Iran, people were doing things very differently, and it was clearly working for them too. So I think that first observation that, hey, there might be more than one way of doing things
Mhm.
was a learning moment. And I was a kid, so I didn't really think too much. But I remember a lot of the ways I was doing things were being challenged because, like, no, that's not how we do things in Iran. And I remember thinking, wait, why are we doing it this then? And I think that being put in a situation where you're challenged, your way of living is challenged, and you're told to now behave differently, whereas you can't see any reason why one was better than the other, put me in a place where I think I started developing this habit of asking, wait, why are we doing this? Why did people do it that way in America? You know, like that question I think started happening. And I think the biggest moment for me was when I was in ninth grade. I was going to a really good school, and frankly, the reason I was going there was to get into a good college. But the school was offering all these extracurricular activities and things that they really prioritize, and I just wasn't really there for it. Like, I didn't care for those things, and I remember politely asking a principal, "Hey, can I opt out of these things? Like, I'm not interested in that activity and doing that little thing. It's not going to help me get into a good college. It's just these things that they value." And so I think I remember pushing back on that, and they told me that, well, if you don't like, they said the priority in that school is to make men, and this is in Iran where schools mostly are in co-ed, so it was all boys obviously in the school, and so their priority was like making men that they deliver to society and grand people with great thinkers and all these different things. And they said that's why they have all these extra things, and it's not just to get into a good college. And I was like, I just don't want that. And they said, well, if you don't want to do that, then what you can do is just like don't go to school and go to these like college entrance prep classes beyond that. And then yeah, you can just get into a good college. And like, because they're purely prioritizing that thing that you care about and not these other many things that the school is technically trying to instill in us. And honestly, I was very frank with myself. I just felt like I don't I can shamelessly say that I just care about getting into a good college. I don't care about anything else that this school is offering.
Mhm.
And I think having that courage is really important, to be okay with saying, like, you know what, I just care about this. Like, I'm in it for this. Like, it's okay to do that sometimes. And so I think so eventually it's a long story, but I ended up kind of following his advice, and I just stayed home and I said, you know what, I'm just going to teach myself. There's plenty of resources and books around. And this was back in 2000, maybe 3 or 4. So, well, actually before that maybe, but people weren't used to just, we're learning things online back then. So it was a very bizarre and radical idea to like, what, be self-taught and learn by yourself, and this doesn't work. And both my parents being professors couldn't accept that one could learn on their own. But eventually I did, and I think it was just a matter of having clarity of like what you really want and what your priorities are. And the school was forcing me to care about these things that I didn't care about.
Mm.
And I was like, no, I just care about this thing, this one thing, and let me do that. And then let me choose to spend the rest of my time and energy differently. And
Mm.
I picked up an instrument while I was working from home, you know what I mean? Learning from home, if you will, and homeschooling myself. And it's funny because homeschooling has its own kind of
Right
odd stigma, but
now.
I think being in ninth grade, like already kind of having been through some social situations, I think it was easy for me to just let go and practice on my own. But what is funny in that journey, as a side note, was that I started to really value conversations with people.
Mm.
Like when I was not getting that anymore, like I would wake up and my parents would both go to work and my sister would go to school. And I mean, it was just me at home. I really was deprived for human connection. And when I remember like going to see my cousin and I was like, this is beautiful. Like, we're just talking and exchanging ideas. This is really nice. And this is what we're doing right now.
Yes, that's
We
what I
do it
felt.
all. And we do it all the time. That's like someone else is yapping and you're just like checking your phone because you don't value being with each other anymore. I mean, COVID maybe made us value each other's time and being in each other's presence more, perhaps, but that's a
Well,
fun.
I mean, that's me. Like, I get filled from these interactions, and this is why I started this podcast during the pandemic because I was missing that. I mean, I was
Mm-hmm.
used to connecting with 6, 7 different strangers a day in the work that I did, and then so yes, we're human. We're creatures. We need interaction. We need each other.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
but I love how even when you're in ninth grade, just probably a young teenager that what you wanted and you pushed against it and you were still successful.
Right. I think the trick is to first ask questions like, wait, why are we doing this? Because and as a kid, when you're in the school system, I think you're kind of forced to go with the current and it's really hard to step out of it.
Totally.
But when I did step out, I think what was fascinating to me was that it just got me really thinking about like why I'm doing many things. And I think when you're constantly going with the flow, like you're in school, you have this activity, that activity, the bell rings, boom, 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 this, that, you're always on doing one thing to the after the next, and you don't have a moment to sit down and ask yourself, so what's the point of this? Why am I doing that?
Mhm.
Living in Iran and being raised in a religious family, a lot of times I never got a moment to really reflect on why I'm following the religion the way I am.
Mhm.
And again, around the same time that I was homeschooling myself, I started looking into religion more and reading why I'm following what I'm following. And I think that helped with like just stepping away for a moment and having a moment to think by yourself opens you up to really questioning a lot of things. And maybe you'll question it and maybe you'll go back and realize why people are doing what they're doing.
Mhm.
Because I think we have a lot of faith, maybe especially coming from Middle Eastern background. We're conditioned to trust our elders
Mhm.
because there must have been wisdom in what they did. And it's
Right.
hard to imagine that they were wrong, right?
Mhm.
It really,
It's
especially
like
for
a
the.
belief system.
Mm-hmm,
It's a belief
mm-hmm.
system that becomes tied to our identity through generations,
Yeah, absolutely.
and it feels odd to question it
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
because it's tied to religion and the elders.
Yeah,
um and it's not an easy thing, but also there's times that it's healthy for us to question those things
yeah.
because
And
time.
questioning, absolutely. And honestly, questioning is not disrespecting anything. Sometimes you question something and you go back and find out why you're doing it, and you come back doing it with more energy and more love and more intention
True.
because you're not just doing it fine. I'll just do what I'm told.
That's right. Well, that's what it's about. It's like we were, well, coming from a Middle Eastern background as well. You just did what you're told because this is how it is, and that's it. And you didn't
End of
question it.
story. Yeah,
Now as an adult, I question those things. And there's some things that are amazing. Like you said, you come back with more vigor, and there's other things you get to choose. How do you move forward with those things?
right.
A big thing for us was, and I'm going to get to my next question with you, was my god sister and I used to tease my mom and her mom, like the book of shame is this big, like everything, like you can't breathe.
Yeah.
And something that you talk about is embracing your shameful imperfections. What
Mm-hmm.
does that mean?
It's definitely a not safe work topic in some ways, and sometimes I'm joking about it. But I think that the bigger thing is, so a few weeks ago I gave this presentation about fast food, and people thought that I'm going to talk about just like secret menus and like how to maximize this and that. And I honestly the heart of the story was really about understanding what your needs are
Mm.
and being okay with that. So some people have addictions come in various forms. You know, people have these different needs that they're embarrassed of. And it's one thing to say, hey, like I can work on myself and just get rid of this thing and it not be part of my life. If you can do that sustainably and if you're not harming yourself, fine, that's okay. But if you're constantly, there's something that like just inherently is you, like there's some urge that you have, and if you can fulfill that like without harming anyone, then just be okay with doing that. Like if you have some addiction to like, I don't know, like if you need ice cream every week or some simple, it can be as morbid or as simple and innocuous. But I think when you just accept that, hey, you know what, I need this thing and I'm going to schedule it. You know, if it's like I need to, I don't know, like if I like people watching, if that's my
Okay.
thing,
So what makes
I'm
that shameful? Like, what's the people watching the ice cream?
I mean, it's guilty pleasures. We
We
don't,
need those things.
yeah, I think, but we're not, we wouldn't proudly tell people, yeah, this is like, don't bother me. I'm people watching right now.
Oh no,
Or
I'll
like
tell them. Don't bother me. I'm about to go have my cocktail. Don't bother me. I'm about to, you know,
yeah.
it's like you're like, I love this because we need those things.
Hmm.
And we need to have fun.
Yeah.
And we have needs and we have wants. And I agree with you. It's like what may be shameful to one person may not be to the other. I mean, I talk about debauchery all the time,
Yeah.
what and it just means fun and being yourself.
Hmm. Hmm.
And if you want to eat fucking ice cream, eat it.
Yeah. I think going back to, again, the whole routine thing that I talked about, when you, I think the scary thing is like you may hold back on this thing that you want to do, and you're constantly preoccupied with the thought and urge to do that thing, and you're fighting it, and that takes you away from being present, takes you away from being effective and productive. And it reminds me of expression in Iran. So they say that in Iran, so there's like the equivalent of, let's say, MIT or Harvard, a school in Iran, and they said that in Iran, so comparing Iran, like the best school in Iran, like, compares to the best like colleges in the U.S. Um, I think they say that the boys, that the kids in Harvard and MIT, they have their fun, they do things with girls, and then they also study all the time. Their minds are on the course, and their body is kind of given to the debauchery, if you will. But in
Nice.
Iran, kids are just constantly thinking about debauchery.
Because they don't
And
have the opportunity
yeah,
to. Well,
and they never get to study really well. You know, so
well, that makes sense.
and so I think it's just realizing that, hey, this is a need that I have, and making sure it doesn't take over your routine and schedule too. Like if I just like don't have ice cream for a long time and I'm constantly thinking about it, I can't focus on anything else, and
Yeah,
then I'm gonna have a binge where I just eat ice cream for 2 days in a row, and that's all
totally.
I eat, and that's gonna ruin things and just throw things off schedule. But if you have these routines, if you will, where like, hey, you know what, I'm gonna make sure like every week or like every weekend at some point I have ice cream, right? I'm
Mhm.
gonna do that, and I'm just gonna look religiously say this is going to happen. I'm not going to like let
No,
anything interfere
I
with it.
hear you, and I'm reading between the lines too, and I totally agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
Because if we don't allow ourselves to be who we are and have those needs, whatever, if it be for ice cream or whatever it is, then we're not being true to ourselves. That's going to create, misalignment within ourselves, and we're not going to be able to focus on the things that, to prioritize because we're focusing on this and it's taking us over because we're resisting it.
Yeah,
When we
absolutely.
release the resistance to it, then it doesn't have power over us.
Hmm. That's
I,
right.
I like I like this.
Yeah.
So, you're amazing. You're positive and you're
Oh, thank
fun
you.
and outgoing. And I know we've all talked about, like, and I face this too. There are times that we go into, that place, the dark night of the soul, whatever, because
Mm.
that it's natural. How do you navigate through those times?
Well, I think one thing that I learned a while back, I think Mark Manson was, I would give credit to, I think in one of his books he mentions this. The idea is that people talk about this like cycle, or if you will, or this chain where we have like, I think it's motivation leading to inspiration, or I think inspiration leading to motivation and leading to action. And
Mm,
people talk about like you a lot of people wait around thinking like, oh, I'm just waiting for that day to be inspired to get up and go to the gym, like just waiting for that inspiration to come to motivate me to start taking action. And Mark Manson, I don't know who originally came up with this idea, at least he mentions that you can just start with action. You can start with action. I know it's like a chain. You think like, oh, this starts from here. And then they like, again, because more action, a lot of times they say inspiration starts and then you lead some motivation and it creates action. And then more action makes you be more inspired and like you get faster and faster. But I think you can, if you're stuck and you have no momentum, I know it sounds really hard, but you can just start with action.
I agree.
And it's kind of funny because it's literally what Nike says, just do it. And I think to me, that's my understanding of it. It's like, and it kind of sounds like fake it to make it. And it
well,
has
a big fake it to make it proponent because I did that for a long, not that I was fake as a person.
Right.
But when there was those days that I was exhausted and down and I didn't get up, but I got up, I got dressed and I showed up. When I got up, got dressed and showed up, connected, I felt better. So there's something to fake it to make it.
Yeah. I think it's kind of painful doing it just like, again, when you don't have the urge or energy to do something. But having done it once before and realizing, no, this works actually, where like you do it, I think gives you hope.
Yes.
So when things are off track completely and you don't know what to do, you just start with taking a step.
That's it.
And it'll slowly follow. And again, the trust that we started off this meeting with, trust that the system, these mechanisms you've learned and these routines you have, they will lead you to the answer and to the life that you want.
That's right. That's right. That was beautiful. Trust. We came full circle.
Yeah.
We touched on so many, amazing points of wisdom today. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
I went over. I didn't even realize it because it was flowing. But if you could leave our audience with one last piece of wisdom, what would that be?
I think authenticity, and people talk about it all the time, but I think this is a big part of it. Really, just ask yourself what you want and don't be embarrassed to be who you are.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I love it. That's awesome. I love it. So yes, authenticity and
absolutely
don't be embarrassed to be who you are. That's where the magic lies. So thank
Definitely.
you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Grace. Yeah.
So much to talk about.
Absolutely. Appreciate it.
I know you had a busy day. Thank you for joining us. And thank you all for watching. I appreciate you. If you have any questions, drop them in. I'll check back. I'm sure Mahdi will also help answer any of those questions. And I wish you all an incredible and amazing day. And I'm always grateful for you joining us. All right. Hang on with me just for a minute, Mahdi.
You got it.